Chapter 13. Houses of Parliament, Monday, 28th of May, 2463. How many divisions has the Pope? Joseph Stalin, 1879 to 1953. While James was tinkering in his den, Lal was in Parliament Square, dabbing his forehead with a silk handkerchief, aware of the perspiration under his armpits. "We could do with a thunderstorm, Guppy. This weather is oppressive." His deputy, his eyes at the ground, mumbled something back. Lal paced nervously from foot to foot on the hard, rutted clay as blue wood smoke drifted across from a couple of dying bonfires, masking the smell of horse dung. All the staff had been summoned before the St. Stephen's entrance to greet the delegation. They were due at any moment. "Anxious?" asked Guppy. "Just a little." As he spoke, the first mounted guard broke into the clearing. "Now who can we see?" A dozen guards in their khaki uniforms were followed by a train of 40 or so other riders. As the horses and ponies mustered around, snuffling and swishing their tails at the flies, those present went forward to help the guests. Scanning the riders, Lal picked out Dr. Chang, about to dismount somewhat apprehensively. Not much of a horseman, he judged, and went over to him. "Dr. Chan, Nin Hao Ma," he said, giving him a shallow bow and taking the reins of his pony. Lal's Mandarin was rusty, but more than good enough to inquire after his family and press for news of the outside world. Chang then introduced his son-in-law, Xian, who was shuffling behind him and likewise gave Lal a bow. Both were wearing simple, crudely cut clothes. Chang, Lal thought, seemed friendly, indeed too friendly. He even tried to crack a couple of jokes. After introducing Guppy, Lal excused himself and circulated among the other arrivals. He was all graciousness and charm, being both mannered yet informal. Once everyone had been greeted, he ushered them into the palace, up the steps and under the Gothic arches into St. Stephen's Hall, where tables were laid out with bottles of cold beer, rice wine, and spicy snacks. Lal announced that this very foyer had once been part of the older medieval palace of Westminster. "Unfortunately, the frescoes that lined these walls have gone. Also, most of the statues of the good and great of those times have been damaged. We did, however, recover 3, and you can see them," he indicated, "just over there," adding, "The woman with the handbag is missing her head." He then took Chang's arm. "Come, and let me show you some of the restoration we've done to this place. Where we stand was once under a metre of earth." He stamped his foot as if to prove the point. "And here," he indicated to a line about eye level, below which the stonework was markedly more discoloured, "you can see the tide mark where the water stood." "How long?" "Over 100 years." Chang looked surprised as he weighed up that statement, and his eyes followed the line around the room. Lal pointed upwards. "That part of the roof had collapsed, and believe it or not, we found trees growing in there." He laughed. "It didn't look quite so grand then." Chang and his coterie smiled politely. Lal then led them over to 3 large display boards. "Here you can see how we found it 12 years ago." They peered at the pictures, muttering among themselves, until Lal led them to the next one. "And here you can see the progress after 1 year." 1 or 2 of them were already turning their heads to compare the photos with the lobby today. "And these photos after 5 years, these after 10. And this," said Lal, "this is our final goal." He gestured to the last display board. "This is as it once was, in its pristine state. Look at all the giltwork, the frescoes, and the stained glass. These are photos of the last official opening of Parliament in November 2070. It was an annual tradition at the time." They showed King Martin I wearing the scarlet uniform of a colonel of the Grenadier Guards, and Queen Yana in full regalia. Chang nodded, and then turned to the others. They spent several minutes talking amongst themselves, scrutinizing the pictures. Lal listened closely. He could tell that they were impressed. Then one in the party asked, "Dr. Lal, as we were coming here, who was the man sitting by the big gates in the woods?" "Gates?" The question flummoxed him, and for a moment he couldn't think of whom he meant. "The naked man, with long hair and a beard." "With long hair and a beard," repeated Lal, a frown on his face. Then he realized whom he meant. "Ah, you're thinking of Holy Joe. We call him that, but no one knows his real name. He's been sitting cross-legged in front of Buckingham Palace for as long as I've been here, and that's over 12 years. Summer, winter, he just sits in that wattle hut, never says anything, never moves. People leave him food and drink, and he disappears, so we assume he eats it. He's some sort of mystic, just meditates or prays or whatever. Now, if you gentlemen are ready, let's continue, and we'll tell you of the plans we have over the coming days." Lal and Guppy then gathered and herded them through the central lobby to the conference room. The guests gazed about the building as they filed through and pushed themselves forward to get a closer look at the model of London, completed amid great agitation that morning. Lal smiled to himself. So far, so good, he thought.